Audio check, 1 2 1 2, audio test 1 2. 1 2 3
แล้ว Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this afternoon session, the breakout session on energy and the just transition for climate and development, scaling access, renewables, and efficiency to drive growth and equity. My name is Hongpeng Liu. I'm a director of Energy Division from United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia Pacific. And I'm very glad to be the moderator for this session. Actually, we are convening this meeting at a very important moment. Here at the 7th Global Conference on Strengthening Synergies between the Paris Agreement and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And also very importantly, this is right before the 2026 High-Level Political Forum, a review of SDG 7 as one of the SDGs this time. But this session in the afternoon is therefore both timely and strategic. It offers us an opportunity not only to reflect, but to connect energy, climate, and the development agendas in a much more integrated and practical way. So as we all know, progress on SDG 7 is uneven globally and even regionally. And most of the countries are on track, but we also remain off track overall in many parts of this world, including across Asia and Pacific. So every year we just have a review report for Asia and Pacific, and also globally there's SDG 7 custodians produce a report for the global review. Actually, last week, the global report just launched. So more details you can access to find this global report on SDG 7 progress. At the same time, countries are under increasing pressure to deliver on their climate commitment, especially you see under the Paris Agreement, the scale, the NDCs, in many countries, developed to achieve their commitment. So the key messages is very clear. So we will not achieve our climate goals without accelerating energy transition. And we will not achieve sustainable development without doing so in a just and inclusive way. So that means first we need an energy transition. Secondly, the energy transition should be in a just and inclusive way. So energy sits at the heart of this nexus. It drives economic growth and industrial transformation. It underpins poverty reduction, health, and education. And it's also central to emissions reduction and resilience building. So despite the strong commitment, there are still significant implementation gaps. And this includes insufficient financing and investment for energy transition, infrastructure and grid constraints. We always say now transition without a grid transmission. So we really need the strong grid to integrate more renewables. And also data and the institutional coordination challenges. And lastly, the need to ensure a just transition that creates enough jobs and also leaves no one behind. So this session today is designed to move beyond identify these challenges and instead to focus on solutions and partnerships, especially how regional cooperation and international cooperation can accelerate energy transition and support the synergies of energy transition and climate actions. So in this session, we'll explore 3 key dimensions. The first one will be how advancing SDG 7 can directly support climate action, including the implementation of NDCs and long-term strategies. Second, what is holding countries back in terms of policy, finance, infrastructure, and governance, and how we can overcome these barriers. And third one, how can we take a more integrated approach to energy access, renewable energy, energy efficiency, and clean cooking in particular, while also delivering broader benefits for jobs, gender equality, resilience, and equity. So we will also reflect on the role of international cooperation, regional cooperation, and the UN system coordination, and the multi-stakeholders partnerships in accelerating a just and inclusive energy transition. So importantly, this session will also launch of SDG 7 policy brief on SDG 13, which provides a strong evidence base for our discussion today. So we will also have our speaker from DESA here later just launch this policy brief. So to set the stage, I'm very pleased to invite our colleagues from UNFCCC Regional Collaboration Center, and to share the global perspective on energy sector trends in the nationally determined contributions. So I have Johi Basal, who is a regional expert on NDCs, and from UNFCCC Regional Collaboration Center. Johi, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hongpeng. Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues. It is my honor to be here today to present on behalf of the UNFCCC RCC for Asia and the Pacific. Next slide, please. So my presentation will focus primarily on the NDCs, or the nationally determined contributions that the countries submitted in 2025 and continue to submit into this year. And the latest NDC synthesis report by the UNFCCC Secretariat has analyzed the new NDCs of 64 parties submitted by 30th September 2025. Sorry, no problem. So just to mention at the outset that it's not possible to draw wide-ranging global-level conclusions or inferences from a limited data set of 64 NDCs, but the report highlights many key lessons about progress that has been made and major challenges that lie ahead based on the NDCs that were analyzed. Last year, 10 years on from the adoption of the Paris Agreement, we see that parties are bending their combined emission curve downward, but still it's not quickly enough. There's a strong possibility of emissions peaking before 2030, but this is very contingent upon the implementation of conditional elements of the NDCs, which of course depends on enhanced means of implementation like finance, which already Director Hongpeng mentioned, but also technology and capacity building support, and therefore international cooperation is very central to unlocking those targets. And we see now that whole of economy and whole of society approaches are evident in the NDCs, which points to strong climate action becoming an increasingly core pillar of ensuring economic stability and growth, jobs, health, and energy security and affordability, amongst other policy imperatives. However, it remains clear that major acceleration is still needed in terms of delivering faster and deeper emission reductions and ensuring that the vast benefits of strong climate action reach all communities and peoples. So the new NDCs show a progression, both in terms of quality, credibility, as well as economic coverage. And we see 89% of parties have communicated economy-wide targets. The new NDCs include responses to the outcomes of the first global stocktake, with 88% of parties indicating that the NDCs were informed by outcomes of the global stocktake, and 80% of them specifying exactly how. We see that the emission trajectories that are set out in the new NDCs are broadly consistent with a linear trajectory from the parties' 2030 targets to their long-term net zero targets, showing that parties are now laying out clear stepping stones towards net zero, although of course acceleration of action is still needed. Next slide, please. So we also see that the Secretariat published an update to the synthesis report in November 2025 with the graphic that you will see on the next slide. But based on a total number of 86 NDCs that were submitted by 113 parties last year, the total global GHG emissions, with LULUCF sector included in 2035, are projected to be around 12% below 2019 levels. This compares to projected emissions increase of between 20 to 48% for 2035 before the adoption of the Paris Agreement. So we are seeing progress, but despite this progress, as was noted by the global stocktake, GHG emissions are not yet in line with the temperature goals of the Paris Agreement, and as we know, the time is unfortunately running short. So the new NDCs are now critical to bending this curve. This is the element of the Paris Agreement that will allow us to change course and address and implement the outcomes of the global stocktake. Next slide, please. I would now like to briefly reflect on the global trends that are emerging from the energy sector in the NDCs that were submitted. So as per the NDC synthesis report, we see that the energy sector accounts for approximately 36% of global GHG emissions. And amongst the mitigation finance needs that were reported by parties, and the total finance needs are estimated at $1,339 billion, which are concentrated in sectors across energy, AFOLU, IPPU, and waste. But energy is the single largest recipient category of the mitigation financing needs, and this is very clear. In terms of the global efforts in relation to the outcome of the global stocktake, in particular on tripling renewable energy capacity globally and doubling the global average annual rate of energy efficiency improvement by 2030, and transitioning away from fossil fuels in energy systems, the uptake of these energy commitments is far from universal, as also Director Hongpeng mentioned. 44% of parties have indicated quantitative targets for increasing the installed capacity for renewables-based energy generation by 2030, which amounts to just 0.6 terawatts. Only 5% of parties have communicated targets for increasing the average annual rate of primary energy intensity improvement by 2030. 13% of parties have reported quantitative targets for reducing coal power generation by 2030, which amounts to a 33 terawatt-hour reduction. And additionally, 16% have communicated such targets for 2035, which together total to 776 terawatt-hour reduction. 47% of parties have indicated quantified targets for reducing the share of unabated fossil fuels in electricity generation by 2030. Coming to just transition, a total of 28% of parties have included direct references to just transition in the context of detailing how their NDC preparation was informed by the outcomes of the global stocktake. A total of 60% of these parties referred specifically to transitioning away from fossil fuels in energy systems in a just, orderly, and equitable manner, which is consistent with the language used in the decision. Next slide, please. Now, we see 71% of parties have outlined efforts to advance energy transition, 40% of which have elaborated on their domestic targets and policies related to increasing renewable energy capacity and energy efficiency and accelerating the phase down of unabated coal power. On this slide, on the graphic on the right side, you can also see the share of parties that have reported domestic mitigation measures or quantitative targets with direct references to the energy-related global efforts or mitigation options that are referred to in the global stocktake, and you can also see how significantly they vary. There is really not universal uptake yet. We also see that the predominant share of technology needs and priorities for mitigation are related to energy, transport, and AFOLU sectors, which were cited by more than 50% of the parties. A total of 69% of parties have referred to energy-related legal and policy frameworks to contribute to the implementation of the NDCs. And these frameworks include both overarching instruments and specific laws and policies, for example, on energy transition, renewable energy, energy efficiency, and electrification. 70% of parties explicitly referred to just transition or used similar terms, such as fair transition or just development pathways in their NDCs. And increasingly, we also see parties are including gender-responsive and gender-sensitive climate action considerations of gender in the energy sector, particularly in the just transition aspect. The references to just transition in the mitigation chapter or sub-chapters of the NDCs address a range of issues, including developing energy transition plans, adopting a holistic multi-sector approach to just transition principles for guiding implementation, implementing mitigation measures and related investments and awareness raising needed, investments in renewable energy capacity, energy efficiency and sustainable heating, transitioning away from fossil fuels, energy affordability, and eliminating inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. I think also mentioning on what Director Hongpeng already mentioned, parties are exploring international cooperation to promote effective and inclusive climate action through voluntary cooperation initiatives, regional collaboration, and sectoral activities like energy transition. 41% of parties have referred specifically to the energy sector as an area for international cooperation. Increasingly also now NDCs are referencing the role of non-party stakeholders. So we're seeing 80% of NDCs reference non-party stakeholders like subnational entities and private sector in the planning, implementation, and monitoring of climate action, particularly in the energy sector. Lastly, in addition, beyond the NDCs, some parties have also announced domestic pledges and projects that are relevant to global efforts, including tripling renewable energy and enhancing low-carbon hydrogen production, and expanding carbon capture CCUS. And the combined effects of these domestic initiatives are projected to significantly exceed the aggregated targets of the NDCs for the same global efforts. For example, for the 64 parties under the NDC synthesis report, it's estimated that total domestically announced commitments would reach 2 terawatts, which is more than 3.5 times our aggregate target capacity under the NDCs. So this actually suggests that the NDCs continue to underrepresent actual national ambition, and more work is required to align the NDC targets with domestic policies and national frameworks, especially in the energy sector. And this is an area that we look to support more closely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Johi. Johi has given us the overall picture about the global trends, especially a strong commitment in NDCs. But at the same time also give the worrying about the gap in implementation. So I really think even with this clear commitment and a lot of overall target, so there is still a gap to achieve the overall from a Paris Agreement and also the 2030 agenda. So now I would like to turn to Sergey, my colleague from Energy Division in UNSCAP. Who is just looking after this energy sustainable development. And he will bring this close to like this region. So what does this look like in Asia Pacific? And he's also work every year for this policy brief about SDG 7 development in Asia Pacific. So let's see how Sergey just give us the regional perspectives. Sergey, you have 6 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Director Hongpen. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to speak at this conference and zoom into Asia-Pacific perspective and progress on SDG 7. So I'll basically cover the same topic, but from more energy and SDG 7 targets perspective. So next slide, please. And if we talk about Asia-Pacific, it is already in the center of global energy production and consumption. So it is also where the global emission challenge is concentrated, because energy in Asia-Pacific accounts for roughly 3/4 of regional greenhouse gas emissions. And fossil fuels still dominate total energy supply in our region. So, and the point is not that the progress is absent. No, it is not true. But the point is that the structural challenges are really, really very large in the Asia-Pacific region. This is why SDG 7 in Asia and the Pacific is both a development agenda and a climate agenda. Next slide, please. Yeah. So let's now quickly give you overview of 3 SDG 7 targets and the progress achieved so far. So the electricity access trend is really positive. So the region has reached 98.6% in 2023. So it means now it's near universal electricity access. But still, because of the size of this region, this still leaves tens of millions people without electricity. And what is more important, access statistics tell us whether a physical connection exists, but do not show us whether energy is affordable, reliable, or sufficient for productive uses and essential services. So the remaining challenge is therefore increasingly about last mile delivery and the quality of energy services. Next slide, please. Yeah. So next, really challenging and disturbing numbers. This is about clean cooking. And that clean cooking remains the region's largest energy access challenge. Access has improved significantly over time, but around 1 billion people in Asia-Pacific still rely on polluting fuels and technologies. The urban-rural divide is very significant. So it's 94% in urban areas compared to only 65% in rural areas. This is not only an energy issue, of course. It has direct implications to health, gender equity, time poverty, household well-being, and environmental sustainability. Yeah. So clean cooking must be integrated into energy planning and finance. Next slide, please. So the next target on renewable electricity, renewable energy deployment, and it is obviously accelerating. Installed renewable electricity capacity in Asia Pacific has increased more than threefold over the past decade and reached nearly 2.6 terawatt in 2024. Yeah. But the share of renewables in total final energy consumption is rising more slowly. Yeah. Modern renewables accounted for only 11.5% of final consumption in 2023, and this is the so-called capacity consumption gap. So building capacity is essential, but not enough unless clean energy also changes final energy use across other economic sectors, such as transport, heating, cooling, industry, and of course electricity. Yeah. Next slide, please. So the next target is energy efficiency, and as we all know, it is often the fastest and most cost-effective way to reduce energy costs, improve competitiveness, and strengthen energy security. So the pace of improvement is slowing, unfortunately, in Asia Pacific. So region energy intensity is declined, but the average annual improvement from 2020 to 2023 was only about 1%, which is far below the required pace to be in line with 2030 target. So you can see on this chart the required annual pace is 4%. Yeah. So we're far below this target. So efficiency must therefore be treated as a core transition strategy, especially for buildings, for appliances, transport, and industrial equipment. Next slide, please. So another aspect, what is beyond the three targets, but essential for the energy transition in this region. Energy transition has to be resilient. That means modern grids, storage, cross-border interconnections, distributed systems, and the ability to restore essential services after shocks. It also means better energy information systems. Many countries still lack sufficient data on distributed solar, last mile access. Another important challenge is finance, of course. The region attracts significant investment, but much of it concentrated in larger economies. So public and concessional finance should reduce risk and help capital reach undeserved markets. And finally, next slide, please. The transition, of course, must be a development strategy. Countries that only import clean energy equipment may gain cleaner electricity, but capture a limited share of the economic value. A just transition should therefore link energy planning with industrial policy, skills development, enterprise support, and social protection. Yeah. So it should include women, youth, workers, and communities in the design and implementation policies. So, and the message is quite clear. Finish the access agenda, raise the ambition on clean cooking, shift from capacity numbers to modern energy use, place efficiency first, and make the transition inclusive and resilient. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sergey. Thank you to share about the regional aspects, especially the progress of SDG 7 in Asia and Pacific. We see clearly there is a big gap and to achieve a 2030 agenda, and I hope this international cooperation will be one of the drivers to accelerate the SDG 7 in this region. Let's just move to our next speaker, Ms. Bahari Sayedi, who is a Senior Sustainable Energy and Climate Advisor from UN DESA, the Department of Economic and Social Affairs from New York, and also the main organizer for this conference. I think she will just launch this policy brief for SDG 7 and SDG 13. I think there's no any other better place than this conference to talk about this, to launch this policy brief. Over to you.
Absolutely, and I apologize, as I was running from one room to the other, I forgot my computer, so I'm gonna have to stand because I need to look at the slides.
Okay, we'll give you this microphone.
And if it's okay, I'll just use the microphone. Yes, if that works.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're all set up. Okay, excellent. Yes, so today I'm here to tell you about a product. This is the SDG 7 policy brief on SDG 13, advancing the SDG 7 climate change nexus through NDC implementation. A little bit of background, this policy brief is part of a series of policy briefs compiled by multi-stakeholder SDG 7 technical advisory group. This is a group of governments and non-governmental organizations convened by UN DESA, and their job for the last several years has been to review progress on SDG 7 in particular and feed it back into the high-level political forum, which is the platform that takes place annually in July and reviews a number of SDGs per year. So this year is very important for SDG 7 because SDG 7 is one of the goals being reviewed. And so to contribute to the SDG 7 review of the HLPF this year, the technical advisory group has produced a number of policy briefs related to all the goals, all the sustainable goals. One of them is on SDG 13. So this one is a joint collaboration between 3 members of the TAG, UN DESA, UNFCCC, and UNDP. Here, very briefly, I'm going to share with you 6 key messages that came out from this brief. None of them are surprising to you. However, I will get into some of the numbers, and the numbers are quite stark. First one, obviously, SDG 7 is central to climate action and sustainable development. We know 2/3 of the GHG emissions are due to energy sector, and of course we know the issues of access, whether it's electricity, access or cooking, links directly to climate mitigation and adaptation. Second one, SDG 7 and the NDCs reinforce one another. Particularly as we look at the new set of NDCs that have come out, you'll see a strong reference to energy targets. And of course, implementation of the NDCs will help SDG 7, scaling up of the SDG 7 and vice versa, implementing the 3 goals of SDG, the 3 targets of SDG 7 and reaching it by 2030 will be fundamental for advancing national climate targets. Third one, I mentioned this briefly, we did look at all the NDCs that came out until May 15. So this, maybe, Julia, you presented an overview based on the synthesis report. This policy brief went beyond the synthesis report and looked at all the NDCs that were submitted until 15 of May of this year. And so there I will present some numbers, what we see vis-a-vis energy in these NDCs. 95% of them have some sort of a reference to some of the energy targets. Of course, we all know progress is there. Energy revolution is taking place. However, there's a significant gap between ambition and implementation. There remains a number of barriers, particularly in developing countries, and those need to be addressed in order for us to close the ambition and implementation gap. Number 5, policy coherence is very important. We still see in many countries the lack of coherence between, let's say, the NDCs and national energy plans, and that's actually causing problems in a way that we are not communicating the level of ambition that countries actually have on the ground, and it's not representative of the real work that is ongoing. And lastly, as we all know, SDG 7 is central to achieving the entire 2030 agenda, as is linked to all the SDGs as we approach 2030 and start reflecting about beyond 2030 and what the future agenda is going to look like. Thinking about energy as part of that agenda and making sure it remains part of the future agenda is going to be critical. So here, some numbers. This looks at the interlinkages roughly between SDG 13 and 7, energy and climate. Wide recognition now, they are interlinked. We saw from Sergio's presentation in the region, this is in this region is pretty obvious. We see it in other regions as well. I mentioned before 75% of the global greenhouse gas emissions come from the energy sector. If you look at the latest numbers of access, we still have over 600 million people without electricity access. That is directly impacting other development benefits and their ability to cope and mitigate climate change. So related. What is something that is interesting for those of you who are focused on energy, the conversation around energy is becoming more and more mainstream in the discussions around climate. This was not the case 10 years ago. Although it's still very, it is quite a controversial topic. Energy remains to be a controversial topic because it has so many facets. It's not just climate, it's about energy security, it's about economic progress. However, we do see direct reference to energy now in the intergovernmental process related to climate, and Rudi has mentioned that as well. The highlight of it is the sort of the outcome of the first global stocktake, which came up with these sort of 9 policy measures. Some of them are also similar to the SDG 7, tripling renewable energy, doubling energy efficiency, phasing out fossil fuels. So all of that 10 years ago was not being discussed in climate fora, and now there is a discussion around the importance of energy in the context of the universal sea. And of course, the last point I mentioned, implementation of SDG 7 and NDCs very much interlinked, and one feeds the other. Did my trigger work? Okay, excellent. So let's look at some numbers from the NDCs that we looked at until the May 15. 95% have some kind of energy-related commitment under that were part of the GST sort of policy measures. 90% reference energy efficiency. And to Sergio's point, extremely important, it is being more and more mainstream in national climate plans. However, if you look at them in more detail, fewer than half include quantified targets. And for us to be able to really go from sort of plans to implementation, we do need those quantified targets. So there's quite a bit of work to be done on energy efficiency still. Now this one is interesting. 80% of the NDCs reference some kind of a plan to reduce fossil fuels out of the share of the power mix. And those of you who are involved in the negotiations, I'm looking at May here. This is 80% of the NDCs actually do talk about fossil fuels, but then in the negotiations, you know this is a very tough topic to crack. So we're still discussing whether fossil fuels should be mentioned in the outcomes of the COPs, whereas in the NDCs, countries are already talking about it. So this is really important. On renewables, this is the sort of measure that is becoming more and more defined. So 67% of NDCs have quantified renewable energy targets. Some of them have very specific targets related to a certain type of energy, for example, solar energy. So countries are getting more comfortable with renewables and are becoming more comfortable with setting targets that are quantified and specific vis-a-vis how to achieve their renewable targets. On electrification. Now, these last two numbers are also interesting for those of you who are very much following the energy access conversation. 86% of the NDCs that we looked at across the 5 developing regions include electrification target. So again, this is important because SDG 7 so far has been the goal that tracks and pushes for advancing electrification and access to electricity. And now you see in the conversations around climate plans, many of them are reaching out. Humping tells me I need to speed up, so I will. On clean cooking, very important issue, across the 5 developing regions, only 41% reference clean cooking. However, if you look at the most vulnerable, the LDCs, that's 90% of them. Okay, this is the regional breakdown. It's, I won't go into much detail, but if you look at Africa, for example, you see issues related to electrification, and clean cooking is a top priority for Africa. If you look at Asia Pacific, it's similar. It's the second region after Africa that is highlighting clean cooking and electricity. And then, of course, there's regional barriers on the other parts. This is the slide about ambition and implementation. Again, I won't go into details. Sergio mentioned this as well. We're not where we need to be. If you look at the cumulative impact of the renewable energy goals, it adds up to 14% to where we need to be for that tripling of the renewable energy target. Energy efficiency, annual improvements in the current NDCs is 1%. We need 2.8%. And here, most of the, this is what we talked about, most of the NDCs, although 90% reference energy, many of them do not have quantified targets on the various energy goals. Barriers, this is not a surprise to those of you who are very much engaged in the energy discussions. Governance, institutional capacity, financing, and infrastructure constraints, both in terms of technological progress, but access to sound data and monitoring frameworks. Here, we highlighted clean cooking because this remains under-prioritized in implementation. We also see this in SDG 7 tracking, where we need to do a lot more on clean cooking. It's a critical topic that requires a bigger push, and this is also the same case when we look at the NDCs. Very quickly, 6 policy recommendations, prioritization and delivery of the energy target within the NDCs. Second one, finance. Of course, this is a critical challenge for many developing countries. Finding various sources of financing, de-risking, creating an enabling environment for finance to flow is going to be critical to achieve the SDG 7 targets and the NDC energy-related commitments. Governance, institutional policy coherence, we talked about this. Again, there is a mismatch between various policy instruments, which also is related sometimes to governance and lack of capacity for a more coherent and coordinated approach in a country. Embedding just transitions and the principle of leaving no one behind as we approach 2030, especially this is important. If you look at the financing stream, we do see that the majority funding that is going to the developing country is actually going to the sort of major economies and leaving the least developing countries behind. Data monitoring, solid and robust monitoring frameworks is key if we want to look at progress on SDG 7 and also feed that into other processes. And the last one is about informing discussions that are to come about the post-2030 global agenda and ensuring energy is well integrated in the future global development framework. Thank you so much. Over to you, Hamping.
Thank you, Bahari. Thank you for this overall picture about energy, especially SDG 7 and SDG 13.
And this is the QR code if you'd like to visit the site that the policy brief is on.
Yeah, this is also on the website of SDG 7 Technical Advisory Group. So if you search of this, I'm sure you will find it. I thank you so much for our 3 speakers. I think it's set up the tone about our panel discussion. That's very well just shared about the pictures and also the gaps. And then I think we will just follow up with the panelists to continue this discussion. Let's have another round of applause for our speakers. Thank you so much. Thank you. So now, I would like to invite our panelists. We have a final panelist, and Ms. Mei Xie, who is a Sustainable Development Advisor from Alliance of Small Island States, OSS. Maybe 1-to-1. Okay. And Mr. Dimas Fosse, who is a regional coordinator from Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership, ETP. Thank you very much. And Mr. Adrian Bani Lessenban, who is a Right Energy Partnership with the Indigenous People, REP. from Malaysia. Very nice to meet you. And Ms. Cederwell Koza, who is a research fellow, Stockholm Environment Institute, SEI. And our last but not least, I'm very glad to introduce Ms. Jessai Santapura, who is our youth speakers. Actually, we invited her to come to a number of our intergovernmental meetings to talk about the youth's view on energy transition. First, I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. I think from the three speakers, they actually set up the very good kind of overall picture of how SDG 7, especially energy transition, and also the commitment of climate actions, in particular the NDCs. So I just have tailored question for each of the panelists, and within about 35 to 40 minutes, and then I'll try to leave some time for our audience to have a Q&A. So I think we will make it as interactive as possible. I just want to have our panelists, each of you, I will ask a question. If you can just give us your ideas in 3 or 4 minutes, and then we leave some time for discussion. So without further ado, first question to Kong Mei. So what does a just energy transition look like for small island states? And what specific support is needed to translate NDC ambition into delivery? Over to you.
Thank you, moderators, and good afternoon to all. Just quickly on what we are as AOSIS. So AOSIS stands for Alliance of Small Island State. Alliance of Small Island States. Sorry, I'm a bit jet lagged. I just landed this morning. We are a group of 39 small island developing states. SIDS, and we have been long champion climate ambitions and then sustainable development. We are active in UNFCCC, and we are also active in New York, and that's where I came from. So just to answer your questions, we have 3 points that we want to share from the SIDS, or Small Island States perspective. So for us, first of all, SIDS are small in size. We are very remote. So many of SIDS are heavily dependent on import energy for electricity generations and transportation. So these dependencies make us very volatile to global energy prices and external shocks. And at the same time, of course, the effects of climate change, climate impacts threatens our infrastructures, livelihood, and economic developments. So in that sense, the goal of limiting average temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius cannot be achieved without, of course, global energy transition. So for SIDS, that's very important to us. And we emit very little. Everybody knows that. So for us, transition is definitely more than mitigation for our countries. It is about strengthening resilience, improve energy security, and support sustainable development. And to go into the 3 points, for us, the first point about just transition is that just transition for SIDS is fundamentally about resilience, energy security, and sustainable development. For most of the SIDS, this is about more than changing energy sources. It is about reducing dependency on imported fossil fuels. It is about expanding access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy, strengthening resilience to climate impact, and creating the condition for long-term economic growth and prosperities. At the same time, for us, just transition is not just, it needs to be fair and equitable as well, and it must align with the goals of the Paris Agreement and then the 1.5°C goal. So in that sense, we ask for the implementation of the GST promise by 2030. And also for SIDS, just transitions also means that the energy pathway must reflect national circumstance and capacities, and countries country should actually retain the policy space to pursue transitional pathway that support their development objective and while advancing the climate ambition. And equally important for SIDS is to ensure that the benefits of the transitions are broadly shared through the meaningful participations of local communities, women, youth, and indigenous people as well. And for us, achieving just transition will require definitely international cooperation and support to enable SIDS to undertake ambitious energy transition without compromising development aspiration. And we also ask developed countries and major emitters to continue to take the lead in this respect to ensure that no country is left behind in the transition to sustainable and climate resilience future. And for us, the second point is that there is a definitely urgent need to close the implementation gap and strengthen global ambition to keep the 1.5 C's goal within reach. The 1.5 C remit is increasingly being in risk of overshoot, and that overshoot will have a direct impact on loss and damage for SIDS, and then the increasing risk across irreversible Earth system tipping point. So from SIDS' perspective, it is a question of survival, definitely, and resilience and development space. This is why we continue to ask for the outstanding NDC 3.0 submissions, and then we ask that the next NDC should be aligned with the 1.5C pathway. And we also ask to see in the NDC that it should articulate how countries intend to implement the outcomes of the first global stocktakes as well. And the implementation of this outcome, as I said before, it will help bending the emission curve. That's why we want to see it being implemented. And then for SIDS, we have in many SIDS, we have renewable energies, energy efficiencies, and clean energies embedded in the NDCs, but then the challenge is not about emission, but then the challenge is really about the practical ability to deliver on the scales, and then this leads to my third point. So for the third point is that in terms of transitioning the ambition into delivery, we will require scale-up, predictable, and accessible supports that responsive to the reality of SIDS. Finance will remain definitely the critical enabler, and for us, we call for the scale-up, grant-based, predictable, and accessible climate finance that reflect vulnerability and not just based on income. And many of you might have heard about the multidimensional vulnerability index, or MVI, which we think that is an important tool because it reflects the structural vulnerability of SIDS and not only taking into account our GDP. So in that sense, we ask for that. And then we also ask for, beyond finance, we actually also want to see other kinds of support, technology transfer, capacity buildings, and also we want to we want supports to be SIDS specific to answer to our specific needs. Across the Asia Pacific, SIDS have ambition, we have capacities, but in the end, we really need some support to help us. So to conclude, if we want to actually do anything in this regard, we need to close the implementation gap, and then the energy transition can become a powerful driver to sustainable development, resilience, and definitely long-term energy security for sustainable developing states. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gong-Bei. So I heard a lot of these words about the resilience and the security. I think this is not only for the small island states. Actually, when we talk about energy transition, especially in the context of the current geopolitical situation, for many countries, and resilience and energy security is very important. At the same time, I think as we always discuss the gaps, especially how to scale up the investment in seeds for energy transition to achieve this NDC target. That's also very important. Thank you very much. And we will move to our next speaker, Mr. Dimas Fazi from ETP, the Energy Transition Partnership. Over to you. I think the question we want to hear from you is about what concrete partnership models in Southeast Asia are closing the finance and the infrastructure gap on the ground. Over to you.
All right, thank you so much for inviting us to this panel. So yeah, I'm Dimas from ATP, the Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership. It is the program of the United Nations Office for Project Services, or UNOPS. So ATP, like to introduce a bit on ATP, is a multi-partnership platform. So we have donors from the governments and also philanthropic resources. We are working to advance energy transition in Southeast Asia, mainly in Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. But we also have regional portfolio covering ASEAN as a whole. But yeah, to answer your question, especially under the partnership building, I think in terms of the models that we are working within the region, we have at least around like 3 models that we kind of follow in our programming. So one is the partnerships with the bilateral governments. So it is where we are working directly with the VIP countries, the Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines, and to some extent at the regional level with ASEAN. And we try to build the trust with the government, asking what they need in terms of energy transition and how we can support them through technical assistance. Because our core tool in order to support the government is through technical assistance. So we provide them with the technical reports, advice, policy recommendations, etc., that they can eventually implement. So one of the examples for this partnership for the bilateral governments include a project on the control center in Indonesia. So Indonesia is a vertically integrated market for the energy sector, and PLN, or the state utility, is the key player there. So we support PLN as a state utility to upgrade their control center. So the biggest control center in the country was still running on like very traditional kind of dispatch model. So we try to improve that or upgrade that through the control center development. So we provide them with the technical assistance on the detailed engineering kind of design. And I think what makes us very proud of this project is that eventually it unlocks the financing to eventually build the actual control center for this biggest grid system in Indonesia. And for that project, I think PLN managed to secure the results-based loan or lending from the ADB worth of like 600 million or something, that they are now building the infrastructure and then ready, I think should be within this year, to be running and then managing this biggest grid system in the country. Second approach that we also take is partnerships with the regional institutions. So as I mentioned earlier, we are also working with ASEAN. In this case, we work a lot on the ASEAN Power Grid Initiative, which is cross-border power trading within the region. And the objective of ETP and getting involved in that is to make sure that this cross-border power trading could involve renewable energy more and more within the system, so that it enables countries to actually secure their energy sources from more renewable sources, not only from domestic supply, but also from the neighboring countries. And for that, we work a lot with ESCAP, with your team definitely, to develop this ASEAN Power Grid Initiative and then provide technical assistance to lay the groundwork for multilateral power trading. And eventually, although it's not yet happening, but then eventually it will lead into the actual financing of the interconnection projects. So that's the whole idea. And then within ABG, you will see that there is ongoing initiative as well on the financing facility that the multilateral development banks are developing currently. So we are targeting into that kind of avenue as well. And lastly, I guess we also would like to create like a kind of like partnership through peer-to-peer exchange among the Southeast Asian countries. And in this case, we are working with Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. So we try to create dialogue with these policymakers among these 3 countries through policy dialogue project that we have. And we try to approach it from very difficult angle, like trying to understand like what are the bottlenecks of the key energy transition issues. For example, on the financing, coal phase down, grids, etc. So we try to get them to exchange among each other, because we have experiences of providing experiences from other regions. And I think what these countries may find it difficult is to see how these experiences may be adopted to their country context. So having peer-to-peer exchange could be a good opportunity for that. And it's also, there's another initiative that ESCAP and ATP is working on, is on the ASEAN School of Regulation, that is essentially trying to provide the opportunity for energy regulators in Southeast Asia to have this platform for capacity building. And I think, yeah, sorry, just lastly on the key lessons, I guess what we try to do here is that We try to make our projects more of bottom-up, so we ask the countries on what they need and then how we can address them. And we also see the needs for having country liaison. So country presence is important so that they can build relationship, manage trust, etc. And lastly, I guess the collaboration, coordination with development partners to make sure that there is no silos among our works. So I guess that's all that I would like to convey. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think the partnership will really also benefit, as you said, the SCAP will work together with the ETP to support the Southeast Asia energy transition. And this partnership with the government, with the regional institutions, and also peer-to-peer, that's very efficient. But at the same time, I also think the partnership with the private sector could be also another area we can also identify in the future to work together. Thank you very much, Mr. Fauzi. Now I would like to move to our next speaker, Mr. Lassimban, from this Right Energy Partnership with the indigenous peoples. So the REP centers free, prior, and informed consent, including the right to say no, and the community-owned decentralized energy models. So how can energy transition strategies move beyond the consultation to indigenous self-determination, and what does the equitable benefit sharing look like in practice? I think you're working at the community level. You must have a lot of views on this. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator, and very good afternoon, people sent from my beautiful hometown, Malaysian Borneo. I'm very thankful for being part of this panel. First of all, I think it's very important that as we are talking about energy transition, as in the first panel was saying, it has to be just and equitable. I think it's very important to, as we transition toward the energy from fossil fuel based to renewable energy, it has to be just. And for indigenous people, it's very important that when any of the major projects, especially to renewable energy and other related to the transition, especially critical minerals, which is very important for the transition. Unfortunately, it also giving a lot of impact towards the community, because majority of the critical minerals that we need for the transition is also within indigenous territories. So that is why free, prior, informed consent is very much important in the process of the transition. Having this kind of approach, it will make sure that the supply chain is much more equitable and is responsible. In energy transition, we're also looking at the access, and one of the major obstacle and also challenge for us to also look at is the last mile community, and many of these last mile communities in pockets of remote areas, in the jungles, in the small islands. These are indigenous communities. So that's why the decentralized system of grid systems is very much one of the potential for the solution for this kind of communities. But unfortunately, without the participation and the capacity of the community to be developed and to be enhanced, this system cannot sustain itself. So that's why we need to make sure that there is a training component to make sure that after the system is being put in place, our communities are able to do what is the operations and maintenance of the system. The other point, my point is that the land tenure, it has to be secured, because a lot of the time, large-scale projects for large solar farms or dams and so on, it's always having a lot of issue on indigenous land. So that's why there is we have to make sure that the land tenure security is important for us to secure in order for this just energy transition to happen. The other one is like when we do a lot of this solution, the aspirations of the community has to be captured. So co-creation of projects and the system has to be in place. So that's why the free, prior, informed consent itself is actually a good consultation to make sure that the community that is really going to be receiving those projects is really part of the planning system. So when we design this, a lot of things can be done. For example, when we do an energy projects, it's not just about light bulbs. You need to also listen to the women's group. What is the aspiration? Clean cooking technology and so on. So that's why in Right Energy Partnership we have been advocating for at least for tier 4 kind of access, and not just like light bulbs. We have gone beyond that. We need to make sure that the mini grids, the off-grid system, can be support productive end use. This is the kind of design concept that we had to prepare and build in our process of consultation with the community. And I think the last and not least is the ownership. Unfortunately, in many countries, we don't have policy to allow for ownership of the system, because energy is dominated by the utility companies. All energy basically is governed by national utility companies. But then, how about these small-scale mini-grid systems? It has to be a policy of support to allow this to be happen and to be promoted, and making sure that there's enough financial support in order for us to build this kind of community-based renewable energy system. And I think the last point I want to make in ensuring the just and inclusive energy transition is we have to make sure that there is enough recognition towards the community governance system, because, for example, I come from Malaysia, it's also Indonesia, we have already the adat system. We have the native customary law that is already there. So I think these are something that we can have potential to be recognized, and it can be used to, in order for us to really accelerate and scale up the amount of projects that we can put outside, out down there. So I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Larsen Ben. Okay. I really think your experience is about the view how community level, the impact of the sustainable and just and inclusive energy transition at this low, the community level, and how the impacts for the community and how they benefit from there. And also, I'm very glad to see, you mentioned about the tier 4, the energy access. You probably know the tiers. Our current energy access, we just see probably tier 1.
Tier 1, tier 2.
Yeah, just for lighting. But we really think the energy service should go beyond the lighting only itself. We should go for the household productive use of electricity for income generating. A lot of things I think we need go up to improve the quality of energy access.
I forgot. Actually, I have one more slide. Okay. just to invite anybody, because this afternoon we are having an event, because the last 2 days we have converged in Bangkok to talk about the civil society on how to make sure that we streamline a lot of our frameworks, because the gender, we have energy, so the last 2 days we have been working together on how to synergize all these different frameworks so that it can be a better approach in terms of dealing with climate action in Asia.
This is exactly the synergies you need from different groups, different stakeholders, and also different areas, energy and this climate action. SDGs. Thank you very much. I think we need to move on to our next speaker, Ms. Cesar Koza, who is a research fellow from Stockholm Environment Institute. So I have the question, what does the evidence show about which interventions best deliver equity, jobs, and resilience core benefits alongside the emissions outcome? Over to you.
Great, thank you very much for the question, and good afternoon, everyone. So as the Stockholm Environment Institute, I would like to share that we are involved in the NDC partnership. So we have been involved in some of the NDCs that some governments have produced. And so my reflections in terms of evidence will draw from that, as well as being involved in the ASEAN Renewable Energies long-term roadmap. And just to highlight that these involvements draw largely from our flagship LEAP program and platform which informs a lot of government decision-making and planning in terms of energy. And also drawing from some of our work in terms of gender equality, disability, and social inclusion in the region as well. And we also had colleagues who did a study recently analyzing energy sector policies across Southeast Asia and China. And it's also interesting to see what the conclusions in that scoping study versus what the NDCs that we have been involved in are reflecting. So on that note, I just want to start by saying, for us, based on the work that we have done, that we continue doing, one thing is apparent. Equity is not something that we try and retrofit at the end of our justice and inclusive energy transitions. So I know we have been talking about the last mile, but perhaps one thing that we need to do is to start seeing some of these communities as the first mile. And that means they are the point of what informs some of our designs for just energy transitions. And that said, I like the morning, human-centered design in just energy transitions. It's something that is also shaping and informing our work. So just to get into what some of our evidence tells us, in terms of just energy transitions, our scoping analysis of the energy sector policies in some of the countries in Southeast Asia and China, it shows that, yes, we talk about just energy transitions, but this is not reflected in existing policies. So compare that with the ambition that is displayed in the NDCs that countries have formulated. It means we have the policy incoherence that previous speakers have referred to. And it's something that we need to think about as we go back to our institutions. How do we ensure that there is that level of alignment between the NDCs and our policies? And also just to highlight also what some of our evidence shows us in terms of coal transitions, for instance, and I'm smiling because part of that work was done by Dimas when he was still with us at SCI, but it's something that still remains relevant to this day. How are transitions happening? How are we thinking around reskilling and upskilling communities? And these are communities that go back to their families at the end of the day. So when we are saying that fossil fuel comes to an end, what's happening? And that brings us to the question of seeing just energy transitions beyond energy itself, to include livelihoods, to include agriculture, to include health. Because ultimately, if the employment of some of these people is not considered, then these other sectors will also subsequently be affected. And as I go towards wrapping up, one thing that I want to challenge us with, again, based on the evidence that our work has produced, to what extent do we engage with power asymmetries across scales, be it at individual household level, in the community, at national level, globally? If we are talking about equitable benefit sharing, we need to engage with the questions of power and how we address those asymmetries, because they are there. And unfortunately, some of the people who pay the price of not having power are the people on the edges of society, who are women, who are indigenous communities, who are ethnic minorities, people with disabilities. So these are the conversations that we need to have, and instead of seeing some of these communities on the edges of society, how do we bring them to the center and see them as the first mile, as the point of engaging with our transitions? And lastly, in terms of what we have seen, the enablers, and some of them have been referred to already, the question of capacity, the question of having gender disaggregated data. And that's not the numbers, but even the qualitative that explains the scenarios behind the numbers. And bringing the question of justice and equity into some of the models that shape some of the decisions. It's a conversation that we are having, as well as the policies, how equitable are they, and what are the equitable outcomes that we are aiming for. And lastly, the issue of finance. And on finance, I just want to highlight that in our engagements with some of the institutions in the region, when it comes to funding, providing finance, especially to engage with communities, those are some of the first budget lines that get to be adjusted or completely removed from budgets, because inclusion, representation, participation requires meaningful investment, and some funders are then not comfortable investing in that. So our conversations around justice, equity, and participation, in the end, they are reduced to just mere talk, because we are not investing the financial support that is required for that. I will end on that note. Thank you.
Thank you, Thank you, Ms. Kosa. I think the idea, changing the last mile to first mile. That's everyone should think about this when we just fill the gaps now for this energy transition and the climate action. Thank you very much for all this good idea financing. That's really a big challenge for all of us at a different level. And now I would like to invite our panelist, Ms. Jetsai Santa Percha, who is our youth leaders, actually, from the different view, like the youth's point of view. So the question for you is, what do young people in Southeast Asia expect from the energy transition? And what would make it truly just and inclusive for next generation? Over to you.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Hongpeng. Thank you to UN DESA, UN SCAP, UNFCCC, and UNDP for the comprehensive report and for this event. It is such an honor to be here and to be on a panel that very much focuses on the just energy transition, and speaking about youth, about SIDS, and gender, of course, is such a great thing, because very often on energy panels, it all gets wrapped up into one speaker. So I want to, to mention this as well. Not having a full male panel, also very important, especially in an energy conference. So onto the report. I looked through the report, and of course I Control F, try to find all the words that youth are mentioned, and I expected to see maybe 5 to 10, and they're usually at the end of sentences that says just energy transition, something, 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 gender, indigenous people, blah, blah, blah. This report has over 40 mentions, 40 individual mentions of youth, which in itself is already a metric that we as youth representation trackers, we look at and we take it very, very significantly. It might seem just words on a report, but how often something comes up, how often AI takes, review of how often certain words come up, actually makes very tangible differences to how things are funded in the future. So we take note of that. We are also very happy to see that in the report that we saw that SDG 7 Youth Constituency, which is under the UNFCCC, they have been accredited as contributing organizers, contributing organization to the report itself, and not written as a remark near the end. We also think this is significant. We note that also in chapter 3, towards a framework for tracking progress, there is a point about crowdsourcing data and insights with youth voices. Now here, we think this is very important to highlight in this room, specifically because what we've learned as a youth organization, a youth-led non-governmental organization across Southeast Asia that works on just energy transition, that what gets measured gets done. It's very easy to be on stage and say we want change. It's actually very hard to track these things, as my previous panelists have mentioned. It's very hard to track something that people don't want to invest in. Big organizations, big companies, even countries don't necessarily find it important beyond just saying that it is important. So we are seeing those changes, but as Sergey and a lot of people have mentioned earlier, the progress is there, but it's not fast enough. And we, as representation for young people want to see acceleration in closing these implementation gaps. Now, if you look in the chapter 3 of the report I mentioned, they also mention the Youth Energy Transition Commission. Now, that is a global commission that we, as Youth for Energy Southeast Asia, representing our region, we've joined together with over 10 other regional organizations across the globe, so we can align on both our policy priorities, but also highlight the differences that we have, even as young people, because sometimes young people across the globe gets bunched in as one homogeneous needs and representation, and that is just simply not true. So to connect and to align on those things, it has allowed us to coordinate, for example, our feedback we have for certain reports, or if there is speakers who are more appropriate for certain topics, we will recommend each other. So we're definitely seeing a higher level of coordination and cooperation between young people and youth organizations across. With UNSCAP, we also have a Youth for Just Energy Transition, or Youth for JET, which is a youth as partners in achieving SDG 7, which we co-authored. In these reports, we also track policies, and we also track success cases across Asia Pacific, both at a qualitative level, but also a quantitative level. So please check that out. It's all on the UN repository for other reports as well. Before I finish, I'd also want to ask, for everybody listening in this room, if you're under the age of 35, can you raise your hand? Who's under 35? All the panelists? Okay. I asked this, and not to point out and not to single out anybody, but to say that when we see the word young people or youth in reports, on panels, we often think they're very, very young. I'm here to tell you that our organization, when we say youth, we say 18 to 35. So that is a lot of people in this room. So when you think that young people are just people who are just waiting to be saved, waiting for policies to happen, that is definitely not true. If you are that person here, you know that. If you're a leader in your organization and you have stars or rising stars in your organization that are under 35, you know that young people are very capable people. So I want to dispel the myth that young people are just waiting to be saved, and that youth age range is actually very wide. And under 18 and below, officially, we call them children. So some organizations are children youth. So if you take anything away from here today, is that how we see the population, how we see the people who are the last mile. Some of them are youth, and they can also be indigenous, and they can also be women. So it's a lot of cross-cutting and intersection. So please take the idea about just energy transition to really be helping those people around you. Some of them are in this room. Some of them are people that you know very well. And with that, I thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you, Kong. Just I really think this is a voice from youth. We always say the energy transition, the ultimate goal is we get satisfactory by the next generation, by like the youth. And the SCAP side, we actually have this platform. We want to bring the youth to meet with the decision makers, and to bring the youth's view for those who come from the government to listen. And every time when we have intergovernmental meeting, we try to bring the two groups together. Hopefully we will continue to do this. Thank you very much for your view. And I think we're just running behind of time, but I just still want to have a few minutes for the questions from the floor. If you just can identify yourself and also address your questions to each of these panelists and just make questions concise and short. Yes, we go with this gentleman. We have the microphone here. Oh, you can use your microphone on the desk. Yeah. Can you just identify yourself and ask a question?
Thank you. I'm Alpha John Seran. I'm here representing Children and Youth Major Group to UN Environment Program. First of all, thank you so much for the insightful presentation. But I have a question here. I'm also youth, all of us, most of us are youth here. If you talk about energy transition, we often describe energy transition as just. But in reality, in practice, many communities, they do not experience that transition. They experience that transition very differently, depending on their location, geography, livelihoods, and development context. So what do you think are the most important, factors or indicators of a truly just energy transition beyond renewable energy capacity and emission reduction? How should we measure whether the energy transition is actually improving people's life? Because I want to say thank you to Mr. Adrian for bringing it up, that we also talk only about scaling renewable energy. How about talking about scaling local ownership of renewable energy? Because if you talk about energy transition, it is not only about environmental things, it is also about social and economy. In fact, some people take benefits from these projects, from these frameworks, but people, local communities, indigenous communities, they do not get like the benefits, the economic benefits from these frameworks. Thank you.
Do you want to address this question to
I'm not sure. So we have
specific-
youths, we have indigenous community
Yes.
people.
So any of you want to reply?
I can start.
Okay.
Yeah, is in fact impact for me. I think the most important part to look at it is in the well-being of the people. At the end of the day, what transcribed as just energy is like people who, especially at least for the perspective of indigenous people, is to live harmony with nature while we are able to, and what you call harness the energy of the nature. So it's a balance, I think. So for indigenous people, we also not against development. I think it's very important to note that. But what we want is to the balance, the harmony between what we are living, what the nature can give us, and what we take. This is, I think, this important part. So if we have that in mind, I think we can have a good energy transition. At least that's my perspective.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think for me, what that looks like, what truly just energy transition looks like, is that all policies at every level, when they are in review stage, not review after implementation, but before implementation, during the policy review stage, that there is a group of very diverse people that are giving feedback. I think that's the first tangible step, I would say first low-cost step, which means all ministries should have this in place. That goes a bit more beyond the advisory board, but the feedback is actually considered and implemented. Now, this is like an early stage, right? Like the bigger stage would be that there is very much youth representation, all ages, all abilities, all backgrounds across, like political, across government bodies, for example. But I think the first practical stage in the short term, that would be what I'd want to see. Because if that happens, it means that when there are feedbacks to be made or policies don't align with the actual needs of the people, it can either, one, be justified by the people on the board, or there is some accountability held. Whether or not that be the group of the people giving feedback is not appropriate for the people receiving the benefits or getting affected by these policies, or that there is a grand plan and that can be explained. I think that would reduce the friction and gap between what policies are intended to do, which are often planned top-down, of course, in Southeast Asia, versus what are actually the benefits or co-benefits or the things that are not being learned by having repeated policies that are planned centralized, most likely in the cities in Bangkok, for example. I would say that's an outdated way of policy implementation, and I would like to see a more progressive way, a more just way. But I think that inclusivity has to start somewhere, and that's where I feel, that's where Youth for Energy Southeast Asia we advocate for, at least on the energy policy side. Thank you.
I hope this explains. Any other question? Okay, seems good. So no further question. I think this is quite a substantive discussion. I think from our speakers give the overview for the current SDG 7 and SDG 13. and also energy transition and SDGs. That provided quite overall global picture and also regional perspectives. And also based on the panel discussion, we heard from different panelists about their experience and their views. I think there are a number of takeaways I think we can share. First, we still recognize there's a big gaps, between the implementation and also between the target. We heard a lot of numbers from our speakers. And secondly, finance must reach out to those most left behind. I think at a different level, we heard from a community level, we heard from national level. So the finance is really badly needed, especially for those vulnerable countries and the groups and the communities. And also from the global review and also Asia Pacific review, we see clean cooking, which is really the community-based energy issues. And even now, the universal access to electricity, we see more or less we can achieve this goal, but the clean cooking is definitely the much more left behind. We really need to pay particular attention for this clean cooking, since this will benefit a lot of families, women and children. And also just the transition is not an add-on. It's really, it has to be the first mile. I think the first mile we included the concept, the real aspects of just energy transition, and which include the youth and the women into this picture. And when you design any of these strategies on energy transition. And also finally, institutional coordination. That's also one of the missing link in many of this process. So we should really emphasize, and especially during this implementation of the NDCs, how coordination among different agencies should be emphasized. Most of the country, actually, NDC is developed by Minister of Environment, who is leading the climate change strategies. But NDC is substantive ministry, line ministries, across the different ministries. I think a lot of government agencies are involved, but they, for the implementation, I think it should be also have a mechanism to coordinate all the institutions to implement the NDCs. That will really to make it efficient and also make this target achievable. I think the discussion this afternoon is really provided some ideas. At least we can see from the Synergies point of view and from this accelerate this transition and just an inclusive transition at different level. So I thank all of the panelists and our speakers and our audience. Thank you very much for joining us and also stay to the end. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to invite all of you to a coffee break, which is in front of, I think it's on the second floor. Go one floor up, the CR1, the conference room 1. In front of the room 1, you will have a coffee break. And then the next session will start from 3:45. You have 15 minutes. I hope you enjoy your coffee break. Thank you very much.
It's a really amazing session.
Thank you.
Has this been
Yes, we can.
actually my core server? I just
Just send it to your email.
on that link.
Okay. Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah.
When you will be free, I just please invite them.
Let's do it now. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Moderators not from United, from. She's from UCLG. Yeah, then. Oh, but like she wants. Okay, then we can do it. Like moderator and. Do you pick both? They said we're gonna. Yeah, but like.
From the election. No big celebration. That might be there on the stage. Yeah, tomorrow we start looking. 1, 2, 3,
Check, check, audio check. Check, check, audio check. Check, check, check.
I'm closing doors. Are these automatic? I think we're about ready to start. Okay, so good afternoon, distinguished speakers, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and welcome to session B3 on smart sustainable cities, leveraging digital innovation at the local level for climate and development action. My name is Sanji Singh, and I'm with the Sustainable Urban Development section at ESCAP, and I'll serve as your MC for today. And today's session really will explore how digital innovation can support cities to advance climate resilience, sustainable development, and social inclusion. And also we want to explore what enabling conditions are needed to scale smart city solutions across Asia and the Pacific. To open and moderate the session, it is my pleasure to invite Ms. Benadia Irawati Chandradevi, who is the Secretary General of the United Cities and Local Governments Asia Pacific, to deliver opening remarks and to guide us through the discussion. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Very good afternoon, everyone. Are you ready for this session? Yes. Right? Okay. So welcome everyone to this session, B3, Smart Sustainable Cities, Leveraging Digital Innovation at the Local Level for Climate and Development. This is about smart cities, and this of course relates to smart people, like us. No, just kidding. Okay. So I think I don't want everyone to look so serious, okay, because a lot of problems we have been facing. So let's also think something that more important rather than talking about challenges. We really want to find solutions. We really want to find good synergies because everything can be linked. And I just talked to Diane just now. Why don't we have only one COP? There are 3 COPs if you follow. COP on diversity, biodiversity, COP on pollution, desertification, and COP on climate change. The most famous one is climate change. So we have been following all the COP mostly about climate change, but actually all are connected. Why can't we make our life much simpler by having those synergies that we talk about? So how to link also climate and sustainability. So we are here to talk about digital innovation. I think this is very, very also a good trend among all of us because smart cities seems to be quite trendy these days, especially if we talk about technology, because now technology is growing quite rapidly. But what is matter is that is it the city we want to have with a lot of sensors in place and feel like we are safe? So I think this is the question to all of us. What does it mean? What does it mean the term of digital innovation? If you put or install a CCTV or you have a good system, is it really for the people, or is it really for certain people or certain groups of people? So we are here to discuss how this existing technology does not automatically producing what you call it better outcomes, but what brings impact on the people, whether our life become more effective, whether our productivity increases, whether also our decisions are based on the data, and those kind of things I think are more important. So we must therefore ask not only what technology can do. Technology is only a tool, it's not the end. Okay, so who is able to access and benefit from it? I think that's a question. This is going to be a tough job for Kurt because he's going to put a setting of the of this whole session. Who controls and governs the data? can the data also be accessible by all? Can we have open source? Because data can be very powerful. People, especially if you want to share the data, then they feel like saying, oh, what does it mean for us? You see? So can the solution be maintained beyond the initial pilot? I'm amazed by listening to a lot of initiatives that all of us have. When I ask each of you, you have those kind of innovation in your works. But how can we upscale it? How can make this initial pilot getting more impacts? Not only in the cities, not only in the territories, but in the whole countries. And when we talk about big cities also have big challenges, but they normally have many things. They have resources, they have also capacity, but what about intermediate cities? Can smaller intermediate cities afford and operate it? And I'm happy to have a mayor from Thailand because he's from intermediate city, and you can hear later how innovation that he has with less money. This is good question because you can do whatever it has depending on your ability and capacity. And how does this technology reduce also inequality or unintentionally reinforce it? So that's the questions I have to all panelists, but let's explore first by hearing from my dear partner, dear partner in professional work, okay? Mr. Kurt Garrigan, Chief of the Sustainable Urban Development Section at the United Nations Economic Social Commission for Asia Pacific. Kurt, please tell us, what are we discussing today, and then what you think will be the outputs and outcomes from the discussions. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Bernadia, and it's never a good position to follow you, but I will do my best to set the scene for today's discussion. While I'm setting the scene, I'm presenting the context for what's happening in this particular region, but it's really the discussion that follows that will address many of the questions and issues that Bernadia has mentioned. So I'll start with the Asia-Pacific context, and many of you have seen these stats before. Since 2018, the Asia-Pacific region has been the majority urban. So most of the population currently lives in cities, and that is expected to increase by another billion people, or about 50%, by 2050. We know that drives many of the trajectories that are being discussed as it relates to energy and sustainable development. And so this is why cities in this region especially matter as it relates to climate. But on SDG delivery, we also know that of that population, currently about 700 million people live in informal settlements. So there are some social challenges. And as it relates to smart cities, they also include access to technologies and the ability to access services that are increasingly delivered through digital platforms. We also know that geographically, the majority of climate-exposed urban populations, or spatially, are in coastal and low-lying Asian cities. So many of the climate impacts and the vulnerabilities are also evident and emerging across this region. We know that cities are required for actions related to strengthening resilience, reducing emissions, and also improving service delivery, including to those vulnerable populations. There are some cross-cutting regional trends that need to come into the discussion. Of that population growth, we know that the demographics in this region tend towards a more aging population. So 1.3 billion people will be over age 65 by 2050, doubling what we see just a couple of years ago. So that reshapes the urban needs, infrastructure needs, and services that cities are traditionally requiring. There's a resource scarcity, 7% decline in renewable fresh water in parts of this region, putting water, food systems, energy supplies, and ecosystems at risk, and also resulting in many cases in the emerging issue of land subsidence, or what we call sinking cities. This region is warming at twice the global average, partly due to climate change, and also we're experiencing on average 6 natural disasters every year, but we know that that number is continuing to increase, and some cities in certain sub-regions are facing multiple disasters each year. We know that also there's about 2.9 billion internet users in this region, more than half of the global total, which is really driving many of the uptake of artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and digital urban services. Again, much of that reaching the formal populations, but also inaccessible to many of the vulnerable populations living in informal settlements. So there are environmental issues, social inequalities, as Bernadia mentioned, and growing demand for urban services. Why is progress falling short? SGAP does, on an annual basis, the SDG Progress Report. And the latest progress report from 2026 has a very sharp and striking disparity. We are on track in this region for national disaster risk reduction strategies. It's one of the few indicators across all of the SDGs that is on track in this region. But if you look at the red, we have actually regressed in economic losses, affected infrastructure and services from disasters, deaths, missing, affected from disasters, and also damage to critical infrastructure. We know that those are localized impacts. So while there is action at the national level for disaster risk reduction strategies, it's simply not taking hold in the local communities. That is a very striking disparity. Again, we are on track on the indicator for national, but we have regressed since 2015 on the local impacts. There are also some clear barriers to scaling urban climate and development solutions. We know, and we talk about it not just as it relates to smart cities, but across many of the issues that address local and urban development issues. There's fragmented governance, a disconnect between national and local mandates. It's especially clear and has been since 2015 on issues related to national climate strategies and local climate action. It's not so striking in the major cities, the primary cities of most countries, but most of the development and growth is occurring in the intermediate and smaller communities. And so how do you scale up local climate action in those locations? That requires better and more multi-stakeholder governance initiatives. To address issues such as local limited capacity. Many of the municipal institutions lack the technical and planning skills to scale solutions or to even develop local climate action plans. There are interoperability gaps, disconnected digital systems, but often financing gaps as well, especially since the pandemic. Those intergovernmental transfers that most of the smaller and intermediate-sized cities have traditionally relied on have shrunken. And so there's not as much financing available to where the growth is actually happening and where the climate action needs to take place. Technology can help to bridge that gap in terms of solutions, but they still must be financed. So how do we turn these challenges into opportunities? We know that there are some smart city solutions that are being mainstreamed across this region as it relates to flood resilience, contributing to multiple SDGs, SDG 11 and 13, clean and urban mobility solutions, smart transport issues, and we may hear a little bit about that today. Most of those smart transport solutions are applications and not necessarily leveraging the full potential for smart transport. Resource efficiency and smart grids is one of the areas where there is the potential to support energy transitions at a much greater scale, and that must take place in many of our local communities and small and emerging cities. And then inclusive services. Digital platforms are becoming much more mainstreamed across all size cities. But again, there is still the access to vulnerable populations, informal settlements, women, and girls. So smart cities we do see as an enabler of climate and sustainable development. Digital innovations can help cities deliver multiple policy objectives and generate co-benefits simultaneously. We know that urbanization is accelerating climate and development challenges, and there is a key potential that we may not have fully leveraged to address how digital solutions and technologies can address those challenges. Smart city solutions, we know, are inherently synergistic if they are deployed effectively. And then the success depends really on people, not just the technology solution. And again, the over-reliance on single applications is not the only approach. We need to look at the ecosystems for digital transformations, and those really can support very effectively local actions. And you see on the right all of the various categories or thematics that smart city solutions can contribute to. And we know that 70% of the SDGs could be further advanced through those actions. So just a little bit on what ESCAP is doing. We've developed regional guidelines for smart cities. We've supported a couple of countries with developing national smart city strategies. These provide the enabling frameworks for local authorities to actually take action. What we have found is that without a national smart city strategy and policy, that local communities are inherently limited in what they can do. They need to have the enabling framework and the support of the national government to take actions and also to finance much of those actions. And we know that we've developed a community of practice and that there's a knowledge exchange that is required. So the practical solutions that are being generated, and many of them across the globe are really starting in this region. How do you share those? How do you mainstream them across cities through peer-to-peer exchanges and other platforms? So we, at ESCAP, we see ourselves in partnership with many of you, with city networks, with individual cities, with national governments, to really forward regional cooperation, including towards various forums that are coming up, and I'll mention those shortly. We do know that many of the countries are making progress on national smart city strategies. 13 of the 53 member states have a national smart city strategy. 39 of the 53 member states have a digital development strategy. There are distinctions between digital versus smart city strategies. You see them here. Smart city concepts, digital strategies span broader digital development in the national smart city strategies. And those focus also on urban transformations, and digital strategies only target really national economic goals. There are significant gaps remaining in coverage, many of those in the smaller island developing states where there are limited national strategies, and there are also capacity and connectivity constraints from the infrastructure that is needed to support. And North and Central Asia is also more at an early stage in policy frameworks, and financing remains a barrier. I need to go to that. Okay, so there are some good examples, and you see them here as it relates to climate resilience, how sensor networks are supporting solutions. Disaster preparedness in Vietnam, resource efficiency in Republic of Korea, in Malaysia, smart transport systems, in Singapore, digital inclusion, where a vast majority of the population has access. So they have made good strides in making sure that they overcome the accessibility as digital transformations are more mainstreamed. And in India, the National Urban Digital Mission, or NUDM, which is really looking at the overall digital infrastructure and achieving it at scale at a lower cost. So looking ahead, we do have some institutional recommendations, and we would like your feedback on some of these today. I'm sure it will be part of the discussion. But smart city units within municipal governments, similar to municipal departments that handle waste, that handle energy, dedicated units that really oversee policy implementation could be an effective strategy. Multi-level governance is critical across not just smart cities, but almost all engagement of local authorities to align national policies, get the institutional support from the national government, and identify local implementation frameworks. Legal and regulatory mechanisms for digital infrastructure, governance, and privacy protections. Strengthening institutional capacities and awareness raising, but also digital literacy for vulnerable communities, technical training and knowledge sharing initiatives, and then finally fostering partnerships with private sector, academia, civil society, city networks to enhance technical expertise and mobilize investments. And then finally, we wanted to invite you to the next Asia Pacific Urban Forum, which will be held in Yokohama the end of August into the first week of September 2027, which will hopefully be a milestone for accelerating many of the solutions, but also it will be only 3 years before the end of the 2030 agenda, and a key event for this region that really will hopefully leverage and mobilize cities to upscale solutions. So with that, thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to Bernania.
Thank you, Kurt, for a very comprehensive presentation highlighting the progress and also find a synergy between digital innovation across the climate action, sustainable development, and social inclusion. I also think that everybody took note of the recommendations as well as the progress, because this is something that we are also going to discuss. And towards this APUF 9 in Yokohama, this is my second home. So I hope you will join us at APUF next year. Now let's move to the panel discussions. Hey, where are you going? You better stay here.
I'm supposed to go down here.
No, you stay. Because I have not opened a Q&A for him, so you better stay here. So it's my pleasure to invite three panelists. Let me first invite Professor Diana Urzforsat. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Vice Chair of Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and member of the Expert Group on Climate and Sustainable Development Goal Synergies. Welcome. Next, let me invite Mayor of Nakhon Si Thammarat, Thailand, Mayor Kanop Kechat. Please. Last but not least, let me invite Ms. Kalpana Viswanathan, co-founder and chief executive officer of Safety Pin based in India. I have a tough questions to all three panelists. I'm sure you can answer those questions. There are three, but you can answer whichever you feel comfortable. How can digital tools simultaneously advance climate resilience and sustainable development? It's quite a broad question. And second, what arrangements are needed to enable smaller and medium-sized cities to adopt and scale up smart city solutions, especially if you don't have enough resources? But that's a question that's good for you, I think, Mayor. Third, how can regional co-organization, international framework, and city-to-city cooperation accelerate knowledge exchange and implementations? So, let me start with you, Professor Diana. You have a...
Well, thank you very much. That's quite a mouthful of questions, and I'm sure that I'll be able to tackle them short. So first of all, really thank you very much for the invitation to this fascinating panel. And I'm especially excited because as Vice Chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, I also have the privilege to lead our special report on climate change in cities, which is going to be released next March. and we are in the finishing line, but there is so unbelievable enthusiasm on behalf of the Orman community that I also hope that most of you and in fact all of you will partner in helping that report really land on the ground with all citizens and all mayors and all decision makers to really make the difference, and also that this is not just a one-way, one-directional process in which we are the smart people, give everyone the advice, the smart advice, but it's a bi-directional. So for example, I want to invite you to review the final draft of our special report. It's still open for review for a few days, and it's really critical that we do get the insights from such high-level experts as yourself. Some of them, even if you're not an academic and the registration asks you for your publications, don't worry about it, but many of you are practitioners who actually know what's important on the ground, and that's exactly the kind of wisdom that we are looking for. So because the IPCC produces mostly these 10,000-page doorstopper assessment reports about every 7 years that is used for the international negotiations and multilateral processes and all levels of teaching and decision-making as the scientific backbone of climate action. However, we also produce these special reports. We only produced in the almost 40-year history of IPCC only 14. This will be our 15th special report, and this 7-year cycle, this is the only one we are producing. And the tremendous enthusiasm is witnessed by many different levels. For example, I just was at a meeting together with the mayor of Yokohama, and he several times came to me how excited he's about our report and how we can cooperate in making that report more the citizens all aware of that. But all around the world, for example, last year in Africa, the Innovate for Cities conference that has several thousands of participants, many of them from the African continent, and many mayors. We were really privileged to have many practitioners and mayors there as well, has had all this excitement about the report. So we really do hope that we can continue having also your inputs from the Asia-Pacific region. It will be critical also to have your inputs into the report in this final stretch of reviews, as well as later on together, perhaps utilizing digital technologies and smart platforms in terms of how to implement all the findings. However, as it was really well pointed out in the previous interventions already, that we are not only here to create all the new ideas. We are not reinventing all the wheels. There are a lot of wheels out there that don't need to be reinvented, but they need to be more interoperable, which was also a really excellent and very important point. They need to be more accessible and so on. So let's see how, because clearly our report is also going to focus very much on digitalization, smart solutions, and opportunities and risks as well in cities, but I can't say anything yet. But let me just also still offer a couple of points reflecting on the previous interventions and also based on our work so far, previous reports, as well as my own research, which is also focusing very much on cities. So first of all, the couple of areas where we have really important opportunities, I think, for digital solutions and smart city concept, especially for small and medium-sized cities, is, for example, to help with the data. Because most often, of course, we cannot do what we don't know, but we can also know if we measure it. However, measuring is always expensive and it's difficult. So, for example, we are just starting a major project with my university together with many partners around the world to make another platform available for cities to plan for their climate action. But that will, I think the biggest service of that will be, and I'm not talking about my tool only, but in general about other solutions, that those cities who don't have access to sufficient data, who don't have access to metering all their data, who have no idea what's happening in their informal settlements, because that's an area where it's really hard to get real data from, and so on. So how we can still make sufficient estimates, or how we can use proxies in order to still be able to take optimized decisions for areas where we don't have very good data yet. So what it really can help, especially exactly with smaller and intermediate cities where resources are not so abundant, you don't have so many capacities, even human resources, so AI can definitely help optimize and substitute for these, both for resilience, planning, and net zero. However, and here come some of the health warnings, which have also been very well pointed out, not only in this, but also in the report, the Asia-Pacific report, which I had the privilege of also participating in to some extent as an advisor in advisory capacity, and that was a great privilege. But we really need to take care is the digital divide. Because we do talk about smart solutions and smart cities, but we really need to be very careful that these are not only for the smart residents, and especially with the aging, and that was also brought up. In fact, we have to understand that not all of the aging population has as up-to-date access to digital services as we would think. And it's just crazy. That's a simple, I'm just working with my mother, that, for example, I'm not able to buy a phone for her that the screens actually can notice her finger, just because all phones are designed for fingers of, perfect, healthy hands. But if you have an aging hand which has a different texture, your phone doesn't recognize your hand, or recognize it's so all kinds of things like that, which we don't even anticipate, because most of the smart technologies are aimed and designed by and for our generation. We really need to understand, or disabled, so who are visually and otherwise. All the disaster, you mentioned the amazing progress made in disaster response planning, but the communities are not taking up. I don't know, it's just hypothesis. Some of this is because we don't really recognize this digital divide, and it was also very impressive to see that half of global internet users are in this region. That is very impressive. But still, it was concerning to hear in the morning that still only 75% or 74% of the population has internet access. So we always forget about those in disasters, in all of this planning, and many of our residents don't have. So how to divide that, how to provide smart solutions and digital solutions which don't leave anyone behind, and don't leave the aging behind, don't leave those behind who don't necessarily have the digital skills. And also within the cities, and I will be I'm sure you have your speech and you may not have time for this, but I would be very interested to hear how, because all these advanced tools, we have many new platforms serving cities already, and the AI-related platforms and agents are accelerating. But some of them are actually expensive. The costs of these are increasing, especially with the cost of chips, the cost of data centers, the cost so do all cities really have also the resources not only to access this and be able to buy them, but then the capacity and the training for these, because these are increasingly complex, and it's not just knowing about them and knowing to use them already requires a certain level of digital literacy and capacity. So, so what I want to emphasize is that smart solutions, just like our special report, just like the Asia-Pacific report, needs to be co-produced with the citizens, with the not smart people. We can not only design the smart technologies, smart solutions with the smart people. Not everyone wants to be smart, and we need to accept that. But if we co-produce and are fully inclusive with the design of our smart solutions and smart cities, with all the residents, then I think we can have smart solutions and smart cities which do work for all of these marginalized and more vulnerable, who are also, we know that the marginalized populations are the most vulnerable. We show that many times in the IPCC. And also, finally, I think my last point is that what we also need to think about, that sometimes the smartest urban solutions are actually the dumbest. Walking, cycling, passive houses are exactly the most resilient, and because they are the lower tech and they are the least emitting. For example, passive houses, got to be New York's new public building standard after Sandy, because Hurricane Sandy, because they turned out to be, even without any electricity, they were able to save the resident with thermal comfort for days lacking electricity. So it is important, and face-to-face communities, just when real people sit together and have a drink or have an art show or to go to a festival or something like that. So it's important that the smart solutions do not lock us into more vulnerability. For example, dependence only on power, which we know is sometimes is becoming more and more vulnerable to, for example, climate extremes, but also security concerns and so on. However, also to enable smart cities solutions need to enable the acceleration of also non-smart solutions. And these can absolutely go together, but just really need to put the emphasis on this dual track of solutions in cities, and the smart systems also paying attention and accelerating these other areas. But I know that all these excellent reports are actually all taking these into account. Just wanted to emphasize some of these important aspects. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Diana. You highlighted a very important point also of the people engagement, public participation, and indeed, smart solutions not always come up with the smart results. It can be also very simple results. Thank you very much. She has to step out, just in case there is a question from audience here for her. Any question or verification you might need? Can you be very short, please? Yes.
I just want to know about the link, how to give the comments. You just mentioned about it.
Specifically for her?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Please visit the IPCC website, and in the news items you will find the call for reviews, comments for the special report on climate change in cities, and there you find everything. You have to register. Don't worry if it asks for your publications, even if you don't have publications. It doesn't matter. Thank you.
Any more question? No? So let's join me for a big applause to Diana. Thank you. Thank you.
And apologies for having to leave.
Thank you. We have a lot of times since we have to finish by 5, so I have 2 panelists with me and 1 resource person there. So let me move now to... Yes, please, Mayor. The question I have for Mayor Kenop Kechat, could you share one concrete example? I know that some of you already heard of his excellent initiative, but maybe some of you have not. The question is how digital innovation has helped your city improve climate resilience, also public service delivery. I think you heard previously from speakers that how this digital innovation also useful for a public or for a community, and also how to have inclusive development. And in the recommendation, you heard that we need a very strong institutional and financial arrangements that made that possible. But I know that in your case, you will present something that everybody can also replicate, because it doesn't require a big amount of resources. So Mayor, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be speaking here. I'll need a slide, please. Thank you. Okay. I will present you our smart city project that implement a stable, low-cost, and easy-to-use technology to improve our city in terms of climate resilience, public service delivery, and inclusive development. You can see in my title is a people-centric smart city. So you think that smart city is for the new city or for the next generation? No. Smart city is for any city in Asia, because our city is a historic, 1,000 years old city. That great temple is a new World Heritage Site of UNESCO. It sits right at the downtown of our city, and people live around that great temple and use the smart city concept to improve the quality of life. How did we do it? I'll share with you in the next 5 minutes that I have time. Next slide, please. Okay. Our city is a historic city, 1,500 years old, in the southern of Thailand, and we are a center of education with 30,000 students and a spiritual destination for tourists with 4 million visitors last year. On the left picture, there's a city pillar that people come all over the world, also in Thailand, to worship this pillar and wish what they ask for, especially Thai politicians, Thai Prime Minister, before election, all of them have to come to worship this city pillar and have their photo taken and show it to the public that I worship this pillar. Please give me the strength and as I can win the election. So you see that the spiritual destination and smart city, they are not different pictures. Next, please. Next. Thank you. Okay, this is our smart city app. It's a simple app that allows citizens to easily report urban issues, including infrastructure damage, waste, animal vaccinations, and many categories. We encourage our citizens to complain. We want their input. We want to absorb any problem that they have to our system so we can shape our policy or follow what they need. And also, the app also provides real-time flood warning with CCTV cameras. That's a low-tech technology, but it works very well. So we install around 212 CCTV cameras along the river, up in the mountain. Because if we have a big mass of water up in the mountain, then it takes around 6 to 8 hours for the water to travel to the city. If we have time to prepare, the keyword is a golden period, 6 hours, that people can see. Seeing is believing. They don't believe in sensors or water or numbers in a table. That's too complicated. So we have senior citizens, people with disability, former teacher, retired general. We all live in the same city. So the most important thing is to deliver them the information that they can trust, and they trust their eyes. If they can see a big mass of water coming to the city, they know what to do so they can prepare themselves. And by doing so, last year, we have a big flood in the city. Of course, we cannot avoid that. But we have a very minimal, almost zero, property damage from flooding because we know that water is coming. So different parties in the city have different responsibilities to do. Volunteers, teachers, doctors, city mayors, city workers, all work together with a single command. What is the single command? It's a real-time CCTV camera up in the mountain. That's the single command. We saved around $2 million last year by using this simple app. And so far, you can see that we have 130,000 active users working together using this simple app. But if you have around 80% of the citizens working together, that's a very powerful tool for the city to tackle any problems that the city is facing. In the last 4 years, the city solved around 45,000 complaints that report to this platform. And the most important thing is that the mayor and the city promise that each complaint that's sent to the system will be fixed within 48 hours. Okay, that's a big announcement for the city and for the mayor. And I served my second term, so this policy must be working because people elect me for the second time. Even I got 65% less than Governor Chachat. He got 70. So it's a hard work, but you have to do it because you're a city mayor. And we have 2,000 city workers working together under these 48 hours policies. And we got 88% of citizen satisfaction. Okay. The concept that I just explained to you is very simple and straightforward. You see any problem in the city, you send a complaint, snap a photo, send a complaint to the system. And once it's in the system, you cannot take it out. If it's in a paper file or you can call mayor, you can take it out from the system. But once it's in the bucket, it's in our digital bucket, no one can take it out, even the mayor. So once the data is in the digital bucket, you go out and fix it. That's very simple. The concept is simple, but the devil is in implementation. It's very challenging. The challenges are twofold. First is how to engage citizens to learn and to trust. That's the key word. The citizen must trust the city and the platform or the app. How do we do it? We use Line application because it's very popular in Thailand. Senior citizens, they send flowers every morning. They talk to each other. Local vendors on the street, they order things by using Line. So very popular, very common for people. It's not a new app, it's a Line application, but we use it for the city. And it's very easy to use. And we train 2,000 high school students that you can see on the top. We call them Smart City X, to help seniors and people who don't know how to use the application yet. The second is how to change the mindset and bureaucratic process of the city. We have 2,000 city workers. We have to change their mindset from vertical silo organization to horizontal organization. They don't need my order to go out and fix the problem. Okay? They take order from citizens, from people on the street. People on the street order the city to go out by sending complaints to the magic bucket. Okay? My role as a mayor, I don't have to order city workers, but I just watch and to see if they have enough resource to do their job or not. That's my job. I don't have to give a direct order along the vertical line of an organization. That's how to change it. Well, it takes a strong leadership. If you get a voting majority of 65%, you can do it. But it takes strong leadership and political will, because you're going to be attacked by your opponent that you cannot fix it in 48 hours, what's going on. But if you stand your ground and you keep your promise and you push for it, you success. And then the city issue a 48-hour commitment in form of by law to make sure that each complaint they send to the application will be fixed in 48 hours. That's very risky for a politician to promise something that's very hard to reach. But if you want to have a successful smart city project, you go for it, or you die. In conclusion, our smart city project is a good example how a medium-sized city with a very limited city budget, like our city, 150,000 is about the right size from many cities around Asia, can gain people trust by doing, and work together, city and the people, to improve our city life by implementation of robust, low-cost, and easy-to-use technology under strong leadership and political will. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. It's really, really impressive, and we can see that through this system, you managed to build trust. And this is important for leaders to have been trusted by their people. Thank you so much. Is there any question from everyone here related to his presentation before I move to next panelist? Yes, I see a hand there. Please mention your name and organization you are from.
Good afternoon, distinguished delegates, esteemed panelists, colleagues, and fellow participants. I am Julius Fernandez Catabay, a geography student at University of the Philippines and a disaster risk reduction practitioner working with the local government in the Philippines. So my research focusing on geographic information systems and spatial analysis to support evidence-based planning and climate adaptation. So working at the local level has taught me that cities today are producing more data than ever before. We have satellite imagery, digital hazard maps, climate projections, early warning systems, and increasingly sophisticated technologies powered by artificial intelligence. Yet many communities continue to experience the same recurring disasters. So this tells us that the challenge is no longer about the absence of data. It is the gap between knowledge and implementation. So climate justice is human justice because the climate crisis is a human rights crisis. For many cities in developing countries like the Philippines, digital innovation should not simply mean becoming smarter. It should mean becoming more inclusive, more transparent, and more responsive to the realities faced by local governments and vulnerable communities. Technologies should empower better governance, not widen existing inequalities between cities with digital capacity and those without it. So, as a local government, are expected to deliver on both the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals, digital innovation must also strengthen institutional coordination. Climate information should not remain within technical offices. It should directly inform land use planning, infrastructure investments, disaster risk reduction, budgeting, and public participation. So I would like to leave the panel with 3 questions for reflection. So how can we ensure that digital innovation moves beyond generating data to transforming local decision makings and public investment? And what support is needed so that the local governments, particularly in developing countries, can access not only digital technologies, but also technical capacity, financing, and institutional partnership needed to use them effectively? And finally, as artificial intelligence and digital platforms became central to urban governments, how do we ensure that these technologies remain people-centered, equitable, and accountable so that no community is left behind in the transition towards smart and sustainable cities? So I believe that a truly smart city is not defined by the sophistication of its technology, but its ability to translate knowledge into safer, more resilient, and more just outcomes for its people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's heavy questions, indeed. But I agree with what you say that digital innovation should be inclusive, should help transparency, should also create productivity. But I think before I ask Mayor to answer, let's listen one more panelist because she also has a wonderful experience in engaging, especially addressing the gender equality. So let me invite Ms. Kalpana Visvanathan, and perhaps you can present how cities embed or can embrace gender equality, safety, inclusion into digital innovation, because the guy also mentioned how can we make it inclusive. Okay? Please be patient for a while. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, SCAP, for having me here. And the mayor presented a very impressive example of how leadership can actually make a difference to a city. So thank you for that. But I want to go back to some of the, I will talk about digital innovation that we have been doing. But Diana talked about the digital gap, the digital divide, especially as an age divide. But I do want to share that the digital divide is also a gender divide. And in a study done of over 300 cities, it was found that for 100 male youth, only 65 female youth were, especially from low-income communities, had equal access to the internet. And young women are 13% less likely to own a mobile phone. And it's certainly in South Asia, India, the place that I come from, the gender digital divide is even higher. And even for older people, we find that the gender digital, in addition to an age digital divide, there is a gender digital divide. So I do want to share that while we are looking at both climate as well as technology, there is a very serious gender element to this in terms of exclusion. So we know that the impacts of climate change, the impacts of climate are very high on especially people from low-income communities and neighborhoods, but even within that, there is, I'm not going to go through all these statistics, but we know that 80% of people who are displaced by climate change are actually women and girls. And in addition to the actual impact of the disaster, very often we find they also face sexual violence and other kinds of impacts because of their gender. So I just want to place the context that both within the digital sphere as well as the impacts of climate change, there is a gender dimension which makes women and girls much more vulnerable, and this intersects on several axes, especially if they're migrants, if they live in low-income neighborhoods, etc. So to place that as a broader context. But I think, as Kurt was talking about, how do we address inequality? You know, and when we look at cities specifically, there's fragmented governance, limited local capacity, and he spoke about a whole range of things that we need to look at. So India actually had a smart cities mission, which was looking at bringing about smart city interventions into initially 100 cities and then to expand that beyond that. We've seen a mixed set of responses as well as results due to the smart cities. And I was happy to hear that you talked about, I think, 214 CCTV cameras, because the city that I come from, Delhi, today has 1,826 CCTV cameras per square mile. It is the most densely surveyed city in the world, more than even London. So I would like to caution, because very often we look at technology as the solution and not as as kind of an enabler, right? And when we start to begin to look at technology as just the solution and not the enabler, we come across several problems, which includes the things that I've said before, but you know, a highly surveyed society, today we know, whether it's online or offline, it is removing our own sense of our privacy, our access to our own information. So I think we need to be wary of digital solutions, not to say that they should not be there, but when we adopt them, how is it impacting the lives of people? And I will also give you an example as I go further on whether the presence of such a large number of CCTV cameras in the city of Delhi has actually made the city safer, and if it has, who has it made it safer for? Yeah, so I do want to talk a little bit, since we also want to look at digital solutions, while I have put down the problems. I'm the founder of an organization called SafetyPin, and what we've been trying to do in SafetyPin is really to use different digital tools to collect data in order to influence policy and programs and schemes on the ground to make cities and urban transport more gender responsive, gender inclusive, and eventually have gender transformation in our cities. So we have 3 tools. One is called My Safety Pin, which is a free user app, which you can download on the Google Play and Apple Play Store, which is for individuals, citizens, to conduct safety audits and generate data, and you can see all the data that's available. So if you download the app in Bangkok, you can see whatever data there is. You can also do a safety audit to add more data to it. But as you go back to the places that you come from, you can see if there's data there. But we also recognize the gender-digital divide, and so we realized that all the data, if we expected it to only come from users, it may be skewed because certain users tend to give more data. And for example, even an app like SafetyPin, when we launched it, which was clearly about women's safety, we found that actually 60% of our users were men. For no other reason, but that is the way that all apps and technologies are used. It is much more likely to be used by men before women use it. So I think we need to understand the gender bias. So we came up with a couple of other apps for doing data collection, which are more, so SafetyPin Night is an application which we use to just generate images of the street. And then we use machine learning to just assess the street on some very specific and simple parameters, which is lighting and walkability and the presence of people on the street, to understand what makes a street safe and walkable for people, especially women and others. And we actually found it was lighting, the presence of other people on streets, so deserted streets are not safe, you don't feel, but if there are a lot of people. And thirdly was actually how walkable the city was. So I don't know what you would feel, but in our surveys, we did not find women saying that the presence of CCTV cameras made them feel safer. The presence of CCTV cameras is an aid for the police and others after crimes have been committed. There is not enough evidence that CCTV cameras prevent enough crime. Not to say that there shouldn't be, but I think it's how much emphasis you put on it. And then we have an app called SafetyPin Site, which is to collect very specific spatial, qualitative data at specific public spaces like metro stations, bus stops, parks, public toilets, to get a better picture. I just want to give you one data point that we did. We did a mapping of dark spots in the city. Really took look at places where there was absolutely no light, not street lighting, but also no ambient light from a bus stop or a shop or a street vendor. And you can see that actually between 2016 and 2023, this has been addressed. This data was shared with the Delhi government and all their departments, and Kurt, really, this issue of fragmented governance hit us in our face, because when we went to the Delhi government, we found that there are 27 authorities who fix lights in Delhi. And this is a metro city, so obviously, I mean, so we were, I'm just finishing. So I think that's also something we need to understand, that how do we work with cities, but this was an important one. And lighting, I'm sure you'll agree, especially the women in the room, a well-lit street makes you feel safer to walk around it, I'm not going to go into details. So we've done a lot of infrastructure assessments around metro stations, around bus stops, around parks, to understand how data generated by people who use public spaces, who use transportation, can actually have an impact and bring about change. We also work with, you know, using technology in innovative ways for young women, especially, and young people, to translate it. So we've had a rap song, we've had an exhibition, we've had a film. So we do a lot of things to get the information out there so the data is not just hard statistics and boring, but data is something that can be made much more interesting. And really to say that finally, if we look at what is it that we want from smart cities, what we want is really safe public spaces, eyes on the street, good public transport, last mile connectivity, quality public space infrastructure, and the presence of amenities. And really, as we design our public transport, public spaces, and look at technology as solutions, we must understand and we must always keep in mind who we're building the technology for and what is the change that it can impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalpana. This is also very interesting presentation. You address the importance of safety, especially to women, and something we didn't think of putting something that actually is not, it's not feel good by the people, especially by women, because this is also a new thing for me, because I thought putting CCTV will bring safe to everyone, but thank you for giving some insights. I have a few, we have a question from the gentleman there. Anyone? Oh, this is very useful. Can anyone answer this? Because, can we go after 5 o'clock? No. No? We have to finish by 5? We have to finish by 5.
We'll go and see if
10 minutes in, so maybe people
they
can
turn
get...
the AC on.
Okay, so maybe let me ask Kurt to answer, especially related to people-centered digital innovation. That's the question you had earlier, right? So Kurt.
Yeah, I think, thanks, and thanks for the presentations. I think one of the key takeaways is that when we talk about digital transformations, we're often talking about the technology itself. But I think what we really see in transformation is the way that local authorities and citizens are interacting. And that's really what technologies are facilitating. So it's the manner in which services are delivered and the way in which local authorities and citizens interact. It's no longer just those who can attend public meetings who are expressing their need. As demonstrated by the Smart City app in Nakhon Si Thammarat, you don't need to attend a public meeting to demand or report or request city services. But I think there are some other elements. Kalpana talked about users providing information. So the crowdsourcing of data, data that's coming from users and people on the ground is also changing the way that cities are responding and developing their services. It's no longer just top-down, it's citizen-generated. And that will continue to change. I think one consideration, though, that is often overlooked is that you never finish or you never complete becoming a smart city. That technology is always changing. We don't know what AI is going to do for cities or city services or the interaction between citizens and their local authorities in the next several years. But municipalities, local authorities, and even national governments will need to budget continuous upgrading of technologies, and that's something that hasn't always been the case in the past. I was working with the city government, I hate to date myself, but many years ago when the fax machine came out. And we got our first fax machine and we thought we were the smartest department in the world. But if you think about that, it wasn't that long ago. And so the technologies are changing so rapidly that it first of all, I think, and most importantly, allows citizens to engage much more effectively with their local authorities. And that's something probably that the people and residents will need to continuously push, because that's the transformation that I think is most important, is the way that citizens are interacting with their governments, facilitated by technologies. It's not the technology itself that's driving it, it's the people.
Thank you. Mayor?
It's a long question, but I provide you with a very short answer. And from my experience, when I start my smart city projects, there are many smart city projects in our city. I start with a concept, okay? And then if you can explain your concept to peanut local vendors on the street, or Grab rider, or caretaker for bedridden patients, or senior citizen who has nothing to do, that just stay at home. And they understand. That means your concept or your project is a concrete that they can touch, they can feel. Okay? If it's too far-fetched, they will not pay attention. Okay? If they benefit them, it's a concrete that they can understand, then they will give you a green light, then you can go ahead. And you go ahead with a pilot project, small budget, whether people like it or not. If people like it, they'll come back for more. Ask the city to put more budget in there. For example, I used AR, virtual reality, AR and VR technology in our city school. Okay, they put this VR camera in our city school. That's far from Bangkok. How can you imagine that a medium-sized city outside of Bangkok can have a very frontier technology? But if it benefits them, the students like it, parents like it, grandparents like it, right? So I introduced like a pilot classroom and put grandparents in a van, okay, and take them to the school to see what's going on at the school, what their kids are talking about, okay? Seeing is believing. If it benefits them, they will accept the project. Right now, we are using AI, a local brain that's better than ChatGPT or Gemini, okay, for tourists. Once we have tourists around the world coming to our city, if they use a ChatGPT, they get the wrong or outdated information, okay? But if they use our AI, that's maintained by the city, update and keep it real time by the city, okay? And we can do it. Another example is the AI in school. We have an AI homework. So we train parents to use our AI to create homeworks for their kids so they can spend times with their kids and they don't need to go to a big school to create homework. And we train so far around 1,000 parents to use this AI. All of them can use it. Okay, you take the hard job. You train your AI. If our city can do it, you can do it. Thank you.
Thank you. We all believe in human being, right? Technology is a tool and it's enabler. I agree with you, Mayor. 2 questions. Is it okay if we finish by 5:15? Yeah. Okay? Yeah. Please stay because we will have a photo session after we finish this closing. Yes, please. 2 ladies there.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Khwalitai Bunyasena from Ratchamakara University of Technology, Pranakon, in Bangkok. May I ask a question to Dr. Kanop Ketchat. First of all, I would like to congratulate to your team on this outstanding project. I believe it has a potential to become a best practice model for Thailand and other cities in other countries around the world. As an energy economist and also digital economist, may I ask about the project's cost effectiveness, especially how much was invested in developing and implementing the Smart City Act, and was made sure economics all social benefits had it integrated. For example, how much government expenditure has been saved, or what is the estimated monetary value of the benefits created for citizens and the city. I believe this information would be very valuable for other cities and countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there one more hand I saw? Okay. Maybe I'll get 2 questions and then I ask panelists to answer and we can close. Okay. That's okay? Yes, please.
Hi. Hello, so this is Ashu, and I work with the US Green Building Council on Lead for Cities. And I have 2 questions, one for Kurt and one for the panel. So Kurt, our approach is to essentially reward cities and encourage them to implement policies to demonstrate progress through measurable actions, qualitative as well as quantitative. So one note caught my eye that the policies are not really showing a lot of progress. So I would really like to know your insights. What could be the reason for that? Because that would really help us understand it better. Second question is about the digital aspect of it. So recently, as I just mentioned, we have just launched the version 5, and we have received a mixed bag of comments. Our focus is on inclusivity and ensuring that in all aspects in a city, whether it is transportation, water, access to water, energy, or whatever else, we encourage inclusivity essentially. So digital governance has come up as a way to do about it. A lot of people have commented that there should be a digital dashboard in a city which sort of encourages, which displays all the policies the government has, all the actions the government is taking, initiatives and results and everything. We also have strong pushback on that, it doesn't really do anything, it's just for show and does not lead to any meaningful action on the ground. So any panelist, I would really like to listen to your insights on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Who will start first? Maybe Kurt or Mayor? Yes. You are very popular. Not only today,
Yes,
every time.
Like I said, we saved $2 million last year by using this simple system, okay? Because very minimal property damages from flooding. And we save around $500,000 every year by transforming filing complaint system to digital system. And for the AR and VR technology, that's kind of expensive. But you position yourself as a win-win situation with a private company. Because I explained to them that we don't need your money, and you don't get our city budget. How can we make it work? So you launch your new product in Thailand. Why do you want to launch your product in Bangkok? Because Bangkok is so big. Okay, there are 1,000 new products, digital products launched in Bangkok. Why you launch your digital products in our city? We are a smart city champion of Thailand. Okay, good students, good parents, and people they accept, embrace all this new technology. So it's a win-win situation. So they agree. There's a company from the US and from the Korea. So they launch a new product in our school and make our school as a sandbox, as a showcase, so they can make a new market in Thailand to thousands of cities. So they invite all the different cities in Thailand to come to our city to see their products. And that's what we intend to do. It's a win-win situation. That's the example that I share my experience. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope that answered the question. You want? Yes. I will also add my part later.
Yeah. I think for governance, the digital dashboard, it can be very effective. But the intention has to be a two-way communication. If it's just something that's put up there and the citizen has no way of responding to it, and it just becomes a set of numbers which you're not sure are correct or not. And I think really what the mayor talked about is also about trust. You know, do the citizens trust what the government is doing? And that is the big one. So I think any technology on its own can be both useful or not useful. It depends how it's used. It depends the intention behind it. Depends on the trust. It depends on the co-creation, the conversation that can happen. So it can be very good, but in many cases it's not also, unfortunately.
Got you.
On the questions related to policies not showing a lot of progress, I think the main takeaway there is that continues to be a disconnect between national policies and local implementation, and that the solution is enhanced multi-level governance. The more that the national government and the local authorities are aligned, both in terms of strategies, development strategies, as well as necessary investments, I think we'll see more progress. However, as the mayor pointed out, local authorities, while many rely on implementation support from the national government, there's a lot that local leadership can do on its own. And it takes that leadership and thinking about the user and the people-centered innovations that obviously have been demonstrated and shared here today. As it relates to a digital dashboard, I would say that, it's not data for data's sake. And again, also the Nakhon Si Thammarat example, it was designed with users in mind. So it was not just to collect information, it was to generate a response and improve the interaction between the citizens and the government. And building that trust, I think, also will help to overcome many of those progress limitations. So it's the policy, but it's also how you address the challenge. And that comes down really to the local leadership.
Thank you. And sometimes this local policy doesn't continue on, doesn't have progress, sometimes because of leadership change. But if you engage people, like in the case of his city, I'm sure even though if he's not there, that system will continue. That's what I mean by please institutionalize all those solutions, not depending only on one person or one leader. Another thing related to replication, actually we have been inviting mayor to several occasions because we want to have replication, and we have a program called peer-to-peer learning, and to make sure that more cities can also replicate the success of Nakhon Si Thammarat. If there's no question, if it's okay, let me just summarize briefly what we have discussed. I think this has been a very lively session. Thanks to all the panelists and of course all of you that contributed to this discussion. The summary first, digital innovation is an enabler, not an end itself. I think this is very clear. And second, smart and sustainable cities must also be inclusive cities by engaging different kind of groups, including the women groups and the youth. And the third, innovation cannot be scaled up by cities acting alone. We need a collaboration. We have we need a multi-level governance to support those scale up of those digital innovation. And fourth, we must move from isolated pilots to institutional transformation. And I really hope that more and more cases from Nakhon Si Thammarat be also seen in many local governments, cities and territories, especially from the region. And we already documented as well this experience. And finally, regional cooperation remains essential, and we also are ready to work with all of you. Just for information, Beijing City, together with Jakarta, are going to set up a committee on digital governance under UCAG framework, UCAG ASPAC framework. So please join me giving a big applause to all the panelists and all of you too. And I like to invite everyone for photo session and to prove that you are here. Thank you very much, everyone.